Scroll through enough subreddits and Steam forums and you'll come across some similar sentiments. She's unlikable, she treats Gallows like shit, she's a one-dimensional action hero, she swears like a 6th grader, and many a fellow essayist have done the autopsy, and the cause of death is always the same, trying to make her a badass but just making her shallow, including one posted recently, which goes to show that even 6 years removed from release, there's still something that's stuck in people's heads about RE3make Jill. When people complain about lazy writing, they almost never explain what that actually means, and usually they don't have to, because a lazily written character to them is a forgettable one, so you move on. But the fact that people are still returning to relitigate this tells you there's something about this interpretation of Jill that really sunk its teeth in. And I genuinely don't think this is anti-female protagonist sentiment. Jill is an established, white, conventionally attractive woman. This is a remake of a game from 20 years ago, so there's no argument for it being a made-for-modern audiences spin-off. Even exclusive to the remake, the cameraman has some questionable morals, and the modding community is far more enthusiastic than other linear games. So I believe people when they say they genuinely found her unlikable. But of course, I don't think anyone was expecting the same Jill from 1999, as the more serious tone of the RE2make was widely praised. So then that raises the question, what did people actually want Jill to look like? I think the answer has less to do with what Capcom got wrong, and more to do with what they got right. If you've played Tomb Raider 2013, then you have the answer. Lara Croft kills a man for the first time, and then you immediately watch her fall apart. She's kneeling beside the body, sobbing and convulsing. The game is downright obsessive about making sure you see her process every act of violence. Close-ups of her tear-streaked face, tremors in her hands, the animation is incredible and it's all in service of one goal, making sure that you never have to feel uncomfortable about what Lara is going through. Her pain is rendered beautifully, and her suffering is cinematic. You're watching a woman be traumatized, and the framing ensures you're moved, invested, and rooting for her. And then by the mid-game, Lara is screaming, "That's right! Run, you bastard!" as she mows down entire camps of men. That transition from sobbing over taking her first life to enthusiastically slaughtering dozens is perhaps the most discussed case of ludonarrative dissonance in the last decade. But nobody calls Lara unlikable, nobody says lazy writing, because the game gave you the emotional performance up front. Once you have the tears, the breakdowns, and the vulnerability, you're willing to follow her anywhere. And that's the template people expect from modern female protagonists. To cry on cue, open up to a companion, and hit a visible breaking point that the viewer gets to witness, and ultimately convert their pain into strength in a way that feels earned and emotionally satisfying. Ellie does this, Senua does this, and it works, we all respond to it. But it's a formula, and when a character skips the emotional performance by not crying and letting you in, we reach for the only language we have, lazy writing and unlikable. Because we've been trained to expect trauma that performs for us, and when it doesn't, something feels off, and we can't always define what. RE3make doesn't do any of that, and I think that's the point. The game opens in first person. You see through Jill's eyes as she's standing in the bathroom, staring at herself in the mirror, and then she turns. Her skin cracks and her face rots, and she becomes the thing she's terrified of.
Gets worse every night.
Then you take control and can see her apartment, and it tells you everything the game is never going to say out loud. There's an investigation board on her wall. She's been suspended from the force and put under house arrest. She's under surveillance by the corporation she's trying to expose, she's not finishing any food, and there's a gun within arm's reach at all times. This is a woman who's organized her entire living space around the thing that's eating her alive, and the game shows you all this in under 2 minutes without a single line of exposition about PTSD. So when Gallows literally saves Jill's life, her reaction is cold because he's wearing an umbrella badge. This is the corporation that engineered the outbreak, killed her friends, and destroyed her life, and now it has one of its soldiers telling her that she should trust him. Later, when talking to Mikhail about the evacuation effort, she has this curt exchange.
My team was sent here to rescue civilians.
Well, you can thank your corporate overlords for that.
Players read that as Jill being ungrateful and needlessly hostile to people who are trying to help her, And on the surface, sure, she's been hostile, but look at it through the lens of her story. She reported what happened at Spencer Mansion through the proper channels and was punished for it, so she stopped trusting those channels. It's like when your parents lie and say, if you tell the truth, you won't get punished. That trick only works once, and now my signed Elijah Wood photo hangs suspiciously low on my wall. It's the same thing with Jill. She stopped trusting anyone wearing an Umbrella logo because the last time she trusted them, she got burned. And then there's the line everyone brings up. Carlos hands her a radio.
I know what a radio is.
And yeah, it's brusque and dismissive, but what's underneath that is a woman who's decided that accepting help means accepting vulnerability. That sharpness acts as scar tissue, so every time she pushes Carlos away, she's protecting herself from the possibility she might get hurt again. There's another moment during the game where Jill encounters a man named Murphy who's infected and turning, and despite having a gun, she hesitates, which Nikolai mocks her for.
Oh, stars, this soft. No wonder so many of you dead.
People point to this as an inconsistency. If new Jill is supposed to be this hardened survivor, then how come she freezes when it matters? Because she's literally being confronted with her own nightmares. If she shoots Murphy, then she's confirming the thing she fears most, that infection means total loss of who you are, and there's no coming back. There's a difference between fighting zombies as obstacles in your path, and watching a human being lose himself to the same virus that haunts your sleep. There's also the criticism of her humour, which people described as crass and one-dimensional.
Bitch can't even swim.
Surely a tall drink of water like yourself can put out a few flames.
Fuck you.
Next time, take the fucking hit!
And I think this is the aspect of her character that gets misread the hardest. Gallows humour is one of the most extensively documented coping mechanisms in people who work in sustained crises.
The 12-year-old is completely out of control, and I physically, if she's as big as I am, I can't control her.
Okay, did you want us to come over to shoot her?
EMTs, soldiers, first responders, you joke about the thing that's killing you as an alternative to processing it, and you can't afford to do that while the thing is still actively happening. This is something Jill's voice actress directly described about her performance.
I don't know what I think Jill is appropriately afraid of all of the scary things that she encounters. She just lets fear take a back seat to necessity.
She's afraid, but she's just bottling it up and screwing on a lid, and the jokes are the sound of the lid rattling. Every quip is an instinct to stay functional instead of falling apart, and the people who call her one-dimensional are looking at the surface of that decision and mistaking it for the whole thing. But there's one moment that should reframe everything, and it's so quiet that most people have missed it entirely. Jill loses radio contact with Carlos and starts calling for him.
Carlos, do you copy? Carlos! Ugh, shit.
Her voice is climbing and her composure is cracking. This is the game showing what's underneath that rough exterior. Jill has spent the entire game pushing Carlos away, and in one unguarded moment, you hear the fear she's been carrying this whole time. And the game doesn't need to give you a cinematic cutscene for this moment, it doesn't even need to take control away from you. So if you've been reading Jill as a cold bitch who doesn't care about anyone, this moment is the game quietly telling you that you've been wrong. But even if you accept all that, there's still the argument that the original Jill was different, that the remake changed who she was. A lot of this criticism leans on the idea that the original RE3 Jill was warmer and more compassionate, but I think people are just remembering a version of Jill that the original game barely had the technology to depict, because the original RE3 opens with Jill's internal monologue.
It all began as an ordinary day in September, an ordinary day in Raccoon City, a city controlled by Umbrella. No one dared to oppose them, and that lack of strength would ultimately lead to their destruction. I suppose they had to suffer the consequences of their actions, but there would be no forgiveness. If only they had had the courage to fight.
Let me re-emphasize that. She's saying the citizens of Raccoon City brought the catastrophe on themselves because they were too passive and weak to fight Umbrella, saying they, quote, had to suffer the consequences and there would be, quote, no forgiveness. She is literally condemning consumers for their cowardice towards the all-powerful and rampant evil of corporations and billionaires. That's harsher and more cynical than even I am in 2026, and I'm literally too young to remember a time before this current late-stage capitalist hellscape in which we find ourselves. And then there's the slap. In the original game, Carlos hits a point of despair and suggests just accepting that they're going to die. Jill's response is to physically slap him across the face. She is outright offended by the insinuation that all hope was lost, and resorted to physical violence when told otherwise. The reason people have misremembered a kind self is that the PS1 only gave her maybe 20 minutes of dialogue across the entire game, and so that silence allows you to project your own version of her onto those gaps. And so with the remake giving her a full voice performance and cutscenes with actual emotional texture, we saw more of Jill than we'd ever seen before, and some people mistook a more visible personality for a changed one. It's something I'm guilty of too. I was deeply uncomfortable watching the Mario movie purely because those characters were now talking and they weren't how I imagined them. So that raises the question, did Capcom know what they were doing, and did they understand they were making a character some players would find uncomfortable? Producer Peter Fabiano told IGN, quote, "The director really wanted to show that Jill is a character that has the wherewithal to get through all situations." Now, wherewithal is a specific and revealing word choice, because it's distinct from traits like courage, strength, and heroism. Wherewithal means resourcefulness, grit, and pragmatism when things are falling apart. It implies imperfection. Jill's actress Nicole Tompkins said in an interview with Starburst magazine, quote, "We weren't going in to copy or mimic anything. In this game, I felt we were able to explore the characters emotionally in a way they may not have been seen before." And in a video interview with Sophie Orchard, she more explicitly states,
"Hey, this is Jill after traumatic events. Like, this is PTSD Jill. This is Jill in a really uncool situation. This is Jill growing up. Like, she's not just the Jill that walked into the mansion incident." So, like, I was definitely aware that this is, you know, a more hardened Jill Valentine. And we also wanted to bring kind of some of that sarcasm and humor to her, because there is a little bit of cynicism in what's happening. As hopeful as she is, and as idealistic as some of her beliefs are, there still was, you know, some cynicism on like what's going on. And so letting that come out as kind of humor and finding moments to just be like, yeah, okay, as an energy, I think was really fun and just like gave a new flavor that I think worked for what they were trying to make in this remake iteration.
So, the director wanted a survivor, the producer used the term wherewithal, and the actress intentionally performed cynicism and sharpness. Every person in the room knew what they were building. But does this mean they were scared of how audiences might react? I couldn't find the definitive answer to this question, so I went ahead and asked it myself.
I think when you're actively working on something, definitely in performance of any kind, you pretty well are focused on what's in front of you. You know, I had a lot of amazing people around me. I had a very good script. So while I wanted to give credence to like how important Jill was to so many people, I also got to really rely on the people around me and the other actors around me. So I was following directions. There was a edgier, grittier, more cinematic version of Jill that they were shooting for. And so I got to kind of follow within that footsteps and find moments of levity, because I think throughout RE3, you see her kind of open up in her relationship to Carlos, and as she continues through that journey. So yeah, I don't think I was worried. I was more excited for people to see this version of Jill.
RE3make Jill Valentine was designed to make you uncomfortable. She's a traumatized woman who doesn't perform her trauma for your comfort, and she's not going to cry so you can feel sympathetic. Instead, she'll strike, dodge, use anger as a sword and humor as a shield, and she does all of that because that's what survival looks like when no one is watching, and no one's scoring you on how gracefully you hold it together. That discomfort you may have felt is the game asking you to play as a woman in crisis who doesn't make her crisis easy for you to watch. And the fact that people are still posting about this 6 years later proves that the writing did exactly what all writing is supposed to do. It made people feel something, even if, especially if, what they felt was uncomfortable. Thank you so much for watching. For more horror video essays, here's one about the lie everyone believes about Silent Hill 2.